I never meant for it to go this far, my neighbor Sarah whispered as I stood in her garage, staring at dozens of packages that didn't belong to her. We'd been friends for over a year, sharing morning coffee on her front porch. I'd trusted her with my spare key, asked her to water my plants during vacations. Now I was looking at months of stolen deliveries, not just mine, but from neighbors across our street. The GPS tracker in my decoy package had led me here, and my pulse hammered as the full scope of her betrayal sank in. I'd never felt such a stab of betrayal from the person I called my friend, but this devastating discovery was just the end of a story that began with what seemed like the perfect neighbor. Sarah had this way of making everyone feel like they'd won the neighbor lottery. She moved in next door about 14 months ago, and within a week, she was the kind of person who remembered your dog's name and actually meant it when she asked how your day went. When I mentioned needing someone to water my plants during a weekend trip to visit my sister, Sarah volunteered without hesitation. She did such a thorough job that my usually dramatic fiddle leaf fig actually looked healthier when I returned. That led to exchanging spare keys, which felt like crossing some invisible threshold into real friendship territory. Sarah's helpful personality extended beyond our personal friendship into genuine neighborhood leadership. She organized a block party last summer that actually got people talking to each other for the first time in years. When Mrs. Chen's car got broken into, Sarah was the one who walked around asking everyone to check their security cameras for footage. During the winter storm that knocked out power for 3 days, Sarah somehow had a generator and was charging everyone's phones at her place. But I noticed how her eyes would track delivery trucks with laser focus as they made their rounds, following their progress down our street until they disappeared around the corner. Her concern about neighborhood safety always impressed me, though looking back, her questions were unusually specific. She'd mention seeing delivery trucks on our street and wonder aloud whether packages were secure just sitting on porches all day. During our morning coffee talks, she'd bring up stories about package theft from other neighborhoods, shaking her head about how terrible people could be. She seemed genuinely worried about the vulnerability of our quiet suburban street to outside threats. The signs were there, but they felt like quirky personality traits rather than red flags. Sarah always seemed incredibly interested in my delivery schedule, asking about upcoming purchases or whether I was expecting anything special. When I mentioned ordering new running shoes or kitchen equipment, she'd follow up days later asking if everything arrived safely. She had this habit of commenting on delivery trucks she'd seen during her daily walks, mentioning specific times and which houses they'd visited. Her offers to keep an eye on things came frequently and felt natural given our friendship. If I mentioned having a package coming while I was at work, Sarah would text to let me know it had arrived safely. She'd offer to move packages to a less visible spot or hold them at her place if I was traveling. These gestures seemed protective rather than predatory, especially since she'd often expressed concern about thieves targeting our street. Sarah even suggested we create a neighborhood security network for coordinating deliveries. The idea sounded brilliant at the time, a perfect example of her community-minded thinking. She volunteered to research package lockboxes and security cameras, taking initiative on solutions that would benefit everyone. The mask started slipping in subtle ways that I dismissed as stress from her new job. She became more insistent about knowing my exact schedule, asking detailed questions about when I'd be home versus when I'd be traveling for work. Her casual walks past my house increased in frequency, and she'd always have a reason to stop and chat if she saw me loading groceries or checking mail. These interactions felt friendly, but there was an underlying intensity to her questions about my routines. I started noticing how Sarah would mention specific delivery times with surprising accuracy, remembering details about packages I'd forgotten ordering. Her genuine concern about neighborhood security began feeling more like surveillance than community spirit. But I trusted her completely, which made me the perfect target for what was about to unfold. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday afternoon in early March, when my sister's birthday gift simply never made it inside my house. I'd ordered a beautiful silk scarf from her favorite boutique, tracked the package obsessively for 3 days, and watched the delivery confirmation pop up on my phone at exactly 2:47 p.m. The tracking showed delivered to front porch, complete with a timestamp and the driver's initials. I rushed home during my lunch break, expecting to see the familiar cardboard box waiting by my door. Nothing. I checked behind the planters, looked under the doormat, even walked around to my back porch thinking maybe the driver had gotten confused. The only sign that a delivery had ever happened was a slight indentation in the doormat where something rectangular had clearly been placed. My first instinct was to blame human error rather than human greed. Delivery drivers work under intense time pressure, and mistakes happen constantly in our neighborhood of nearly identical houses. I figured the package had been dropped at 47 Pine Street instead of 49, or maybe the driver had misread my address and left it 3 doors down. I spent my entire lunch break walking the block, checking with neighbors and looking for any sign of the missing scarf. Mrs. Patterson from across the street hadn't seen anything unusual, and the college students next to her never answered their door anyway. The rational part of my brain kept insisting this was just a logistics hiccup that would resolve itself once I called customer service. I spent far too long on the phone with customer service only to be offered a half refund and told to file a report. I reordered the scarf, paid the 50% surcharge, and chalked the whole experience up to modern life's small annoyances. The replacement arrived without incident the following week, and I forgot about the missing package until it happened again. This time, it was a set of specialty kitchen knives I'd ordered for a cooking class I was taking. The scarf incident suddenly felt less like coincidence and more like the beginning of a pattern. The thefts escalated over the following months, creating a sequence that became impossible to dismiss as random misdeliveries. A Bluetooth speaker disappeared in April, followed by a coffee maker in May, then a tablet in June. Each time, the tracking showed successful delivery, and each time, I found nothing but empty space where my package should have been. The financial impact started adding up in ways that affected my monthly budget, especially since most retailers wouldn't provide full refunds for items their systems showed as delivered. I was essentially paying twice for everything I ordered online, once for the original item and again for the replacement. Sarah appeared at my door within hours of my third missing package, carrying a plate of chocolate chip cookies and wearing an expression of genuine concern. She'd noticed me walking around the neighborhood looking frustrated and wanted to know if everything was okay. When I explained about the missing deliveries, her reaction seemed perfectly appropriate for a caring neighbor. She listened intently, asked thoughtful questions about the timing and delivery company, and offered to keep an eye out for any suspicious activity during her daily walks. Her suggestion to install a security camera made complete sense, and she even recommended a specific brand that had worked well for her cousin in Seattle. The theft seemed to target specific types of packages rather than grabbing everything that appeared on porches. Mail and small envelope deliveries always made it inside safely, but anything in a substantial box disappeared within hours of arrival. Electronics vanished consistently, while books and clothing sometimes survived. The pattern suggested someone was watching my deliveries carefully, making calculated decisions about what was worth stealing versus what would be too risky or not valuable enough. Sarah remained my most supportive neighbor through each incident, always ready with sympathy and practical suggestions. She started texting me when she noticed delivery trucks on our street, keeping me informed about packages that arrived while I was at work. Her willingness to help felt like the one bright spot in an increasingly frustrating situation. By late July, I knew I needed to take action, and her camera recommendation seemed like the perfect solution to finally catch whoever was targeting my deliveries. Installing security cameras turned out to be the decision that changed everything, though not in the way I expected when I mounted those wireless units to my porch ceiling. I chose a system with motion detection and cloud storage, figuring that catching a random neighborhood thief would be straightforward once I had video evidence. The setup process took most of a Saturday afternoon, running cables and adjusting angles to cover every approach to my front door. I felt satisfied knowing that the next package theft would be captured in high-definition detail, giving me concrete proof for police reports and insurance claims. I logged every delivery and disappearance in a simple chart, and a pattern emerged that made my blood run cold. Packages delivered while I was at work vanished consistently, but items arriving during my lunch breaks or sick days remained untouched. The thief seemed to know exactly when my house would be empty, avoiding times when my car sat in the driveway or lights were on during typical work hours. This wasn't random opportunistic crime, but calculated theft based on intimate knowledge of my daily schedule. Someone was tracking my movements with precision that made my skin crawl. The evidence pointed towards someone with inside access to my routines, someone who knew when I traveled for work and when I worked from home. Random neighborhood thieves don't have detailed information about residents' schedules, and the theft pattern showed planning that went far beyond casual observation. Whoever was taking my packages understood my work calendar, knew my typical arrival and departure times, and could predict when my house would be vulnerable. The realization hit me like cold water that this person had been studying me for months. Then came the breakthrough that made everything click into place. I started cross-referencing the theft times with my text conversations, and my hands actually trembled as the pattern became undeniable. Packages disappeared shortly after I mentioned being stuck in meetings or traveling for business. Someone was using my own communications to time their crimes, turning my casual updates about daily life into intelligence for theft operations. My stomach twisted as I realized the thief wasn't just watching my house from the outside, but had access to information I only shared with close friends and neighbors. August 15th was the day I saw Sarah on my security footage, casually walking up my driveway at 3:22 p.m. to collect a package that had been delivered during my afternoon conference call. The camera captured her approaching my front door with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. No furtive glancing or suspicious behavior that you'd expect from a criminal. She picked up the box containing wireless headphones I'd ordered, tucked it under her arm like she was helping a friend, and walked back to her house as if she'd just completed a neighborly favor. Watching that footage felt like having the ground disappear beneath my feet, as months of friendship and trust collapsed into a single devastating video clip. I replayed the sequence dozens of times, searching for some innocent explanation that would preserve the Sarah I thought I knew. Maybe she was protecting the package from potential thieves, planning to surprise me with its safe delivery when I got home. But her body language showed no intention of returning my property, and the timestamp proved she'd taken it during the exact window when she knew I'd be unavailable. The emotional impact of watching a trusted friend systematically steal from me created a pain that went beyond financial loss into something deeper and more personal. Sarah had sat on my porch that very morning, drinking coffee and expressing concern about recent thefts in the neighborhood, all while planning to rob me that same afternoon. Every helpful suggestion about security measures, every sympathetic comment about my missing packages, every offer to watch my house during business trips now revealed itself as performance designed to gather intelligence for her crimes. Her helpful offers to watch the house suddenly looked like surveillance opportunities, chances to study my routines and identify optimal theft windows. Those morning conversations where she seemed so interested in my work schedule weren't friendly curiosity but reconnaissance for criminal planning. Sarah had weaponized our friendship, turning trust into access and kindness into vulnerability. Now I had proof, but proof alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to catch her in the act with evidence so overwhelming that denial would be impossible. How do you catch someone who knows your work schedule better than your own boss? Someone who has your spare key and your complete trust? The challenge of trapping Sarah required thinking like a criminal while maintaining the facade of an oblivious victim. I needed to create bait irresistible enough to guarantee she'd take it, while gathering evidence so solid that no amount of manipulation could explain it away. The planning process consumed every spare moment for 2 weeks, as I researched GPS tracking devices and studied the timing patterns from my security footage. Selecting the perfect decoy item meant finding something valuable enough to tempt Sarah, but practical enough to hide a tracking device inside. I settled on a high-end wireless speaker system, the kind of electronics that had disappeared consistently from my porch. She'd taken that same line of electronics twice before, making this the perfect bait. The speaker had enough internal space to conceal a GPS tracker without affecting its appearance, and the retail price of $300 made it an attractive target. I ordered the speaker using expedited shipping, ensuring it would arrive on a Thursday afternoon when Sarah typically walked Luna past my house around 4 o'clock. The GPS tracker installation required surgical precision to avoid detection if Sarah examined the package closely. I purchased a compact tracking device designed for vehicle monitoring, small enough to fit inside the speaker's packaging without creating suspicious bulges or rattling sounds. The tracker transmitted location data every 30 seconds, providing real-time updates through a smartphone app that would alert me the moment the package moved. I carefully opened the original packaging, secured the tracker inside the speaker's foam padding, and resealed everything using clear tape that matched the manufacturer's original sealing. Acting normal around Sarah while setting this trap felt like performing in a play where forgetting my lines could ruin everything. During our morning coffee routine the day before the package arrived, I had to suppress the urge to study her face for signs of guilt or deception. She seemed relaxed and friendly, asking about my work projects and sharing updates about her job at the marketing firm. I forced myself to participate in our usual banter about neighborhood happenings, even as my mind raced through final preparations for the following day's sting operation. The weirdest part was how natural it felt to play innocent, like I was discovering some hidden talent for deception I never knew I possessed. The psychological difficulty of maintaining our friendship facade during trap preparation created a constant knot of tension in my stomach that made eating and sleeping nearly impossible. Every smile I gave Sarah felt like a betrayal of my own instincts, while every laugh at her jokes made me question whether I was making a terrible mistake about someone I genuinely cared about. The uncertainty gnawed at me during quiet moments, whispering doubts about whether the security footage had captured some innocent explanation I'd missed. But the pattern of thefts was too precise, too perfectly timed to Sarah's knowledge of my schedule. My timing strategy required analyzing 3 weeks of delivery patterns to identify the optimal window when Sarah would have both access and opportunity. Packages delivered between 2 and 5 in the afternoon disappeared most consistently, corresponding with Sarah's work-from-home schedule and her dog walking routine. I arranged for the speaker to arrive at exactly 3:30 on Thursday, a time when I'd normally be in my longest weekly meeting and unavailable to retrieve deliveries immediately. I even mentioned this meeting during Wednesday's coffee conversation, casually complaining about how the conference call always ran over time. Every conversation during the final preparation days became a careful dance of gathering intelligence while revealing nothing about my suspicions or plans. When Sarah asked about recent online orders during our Thursday morning coffee, I mentioned expecting a replacement for headphones that had been stolen the previous month, setting up the perfect cover story for why a valuable electronics package would be arriving. Her eyes lit up with what I now recognized as predatory interest, though she expressed appropriate sympathy about my continued theft problems. The moment when everything was in place arrived Thursday afternoon as I sat in my office conference room, monitoring the GPS tracking app while pretending to focus on quarterly budget discussions. The speaker had been delivered at 3:28, and now I could only wait for the notification that would finally expose months of systematic betrayal. The GPS alert shattered my Thursday afternoon at exactly 4:17, while I sat in the conference room pretending to care about quarterly projections. My phone buzzed against my leg, and I glanced down to see the tracking app notification that made my heart race. Device location changed. The red dot on the map had moved from my front porch to Sarah's driveway, confirming what I'd hoped wouldn't be true. My trap was working perfectly, which meant my friend was exactly the thief I'd suspected. I excused myself from the meeting, claiming a family emergency, and drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The GPS tracker showed the package had moved into Sarah's garage and remained stationary for the past 20 minutes. I sat in my car outside my house for another 10 minutes, staring at the tracking app and trying to prepare myself emotionally for what came next. Confronting someone you trust requires dismantling every positive memory you've built with them. Following the GPS signal to Sarah's garage meant walking across the yard where our dogs had played together countless times, past the flower bed she'd helped me plant last spring. I approached her side door with the deliberate steps of someone who knew they were about to destroy a friendship forever. The tracking app showed my package was definitely inside her garage, along with God knows what else. I knocked 3 times, waited, then knocked again before calling her name. When she finally answered, her face went through a series of expressions that told me everything I needed to know. Nothing could have prepared me for the moment Sarah opened her garage door. She stood there holding the wireless speaker box in her hands, frozen like a deer in headlights, with dozens of other packages stacked on shelves behind her. My throat tightened as the scope of her operation hit me like a physical blow, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. This wasn't impulse crime but calculated robbery that had been happening right under my nose. The discovery of not just my bait package but dozens of stolen deliveries from multiple neighbors transformed my personal betrayal into something much larger and more devastating. I recognized packages with address labels from 3 different streets, items that had been reported missing in our neighborhood group chat over the past 6 months. Sarah had been running a full-scale theft operation, using her position as the helpful neighbor to identify targets and gather intelligence about delivery schedules. The financial impact on our community suddenly became clear as I counted at least 40 packages that didn't belong to her. Sarah's reaction when caught shifted from shock to desperate explanation in a matter of seconds, her voice taking on a pleading tone I'd never heard before. She started stammering about financial pressure from her new job and unexpected medical bills, claiming the thefts had started small and spiraled beyond her control. But her excuses contradicted the organized nature of her operation, the careful timing that showed months of planning rather than desperate impulse decisions. She begged me to understand that she'd never meant to hurt our friendship. Her attempts to minimize the crime collapsed when I pointed to the detailed notes I could see on her workbench, pages that appeared to track neighbors' schedules and delivery patterns. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she realized that her organizational system had exposed the calculated nature of her crimes. The moment when all pretense dropped happened when she looked directly at me and said, "I never meant for it to go this far," finally admitting what we both knew to be true. I pulled out my phone to call the police, watching Sarah's face crumble as she realized that our friendship couldn't protect her from the legal reality of what she'd done. But as I stood there in her garage, surrounded by evidence of systematic theft, I began to understand that what I'd discovered was far more sophisticated than simple neighbor-to-neighbor crime. The whiteboard mounted on Sarah's garage wall revealed the true scope of her operation, with color-coded delivery schedules and timing notes written in her distinctive handwriting. She had tracked delivery patterns for our entire neighborhood, noting which houses received packages on specific days and which residents worked predictable schedules. Color-coded markers indicated different levels of risk and opportunity, with my address circled in red and marked as high-value, consistent schedule. The methodical nature of her record keeping showed this operation had been developing for far longer than I'd realized, transforming what I'd thought was friendship into calculated surveillance. The systematic organization of stolen goods hit me like a punch to the gut as I stood there counting rows of packages arranged by size and apparent value. Metal shelving units lined two walls, with packages sorted into categories that suggested months of careful planning. This wasn't the chaotic accumulation of an impulse thief, but the organized inventory of someone running a calculated operation that resembled a small business built on betrayal. Sarah had been targeting multiple households strategically, using her position as the friendly neighborhood coordinator to gather intelligence on everyone's routines. I recognized packages with shipping labels from the Martinez family 3 houses down, the elderly couple across the street, and the young professionals who lived in the corner house. She had mapped out a theft network that covered nearly a dozen homes within a 4-block radius, each one representing a calculated decision based on vulnerability and potential profit. The scope of her crimes extended throughout our community in ways that made my personal betrayal feel like just one small piece of a much larger puzzle. The discovery of detailed notes about neighbors' schedules and delivery patterns filled an entire notebook that Sarah had left open on her workbench. Page after page contained observations about work schedules, vacation plans, and even personal habits that would affect package security. She had noted that Mrs. Chen always retrieved packages immediately, making her a poor target, while the college students often left deliveries unattended for days. My own schedule was documented with disturbing accuracy, including notes about my business trips, late meetings, and even my lunch break timing. She had turned friendship into reconnaissance, using casual conversations to gather intelligence for criminal planning. The realization that our entire friendship may have been calculated from the beginning hit me as I read through her notes and found entries dating back to shortly after she moved in. Sarah had documented our relationship milestones alongside theft opportunities, noting when I'd given her my spare key and when I'd started sharing my travel plans. Her notes revealed that she'd specifically cultivated relationships with neighbors who seemed trusting and had valuable delivery patterns. The banana bread, the morning coffees, the dog walking routines, all of it had been performance designed to create access and gather information. Sarah had weaponized the very social bonds that were supposed to make neighborhoods safer, leveraging her role as a neighborhood organizer to collect data about everyone's vulnerabilities. Her block party hadn't been community building but reconnaissance gathering, allowing her to observe houses and routines under the guise of social interaction. The neighborhood group chat she'd created served as an early warning system for her crimes, letting her know when people would be traveling or expecting valuable deliveries. Receipts showed she'd been flipping stolen goods across the country, operating under multiple seller accounts to move merchandise quickly and avoid detection. The financial records revealed thousands of dollars in transactions over the past 6 months, proving that her thefts were generating substantial income rather than simply supporting personal needs. She'd transformed our quiet suburban street into a distribution center for her theft operation, using our own packages to fund a criminal enterprise that extended far beyond our neighborhood. Standing in that garage, surrounded by evidence of systematic betrayal, I understood that I'd been living next to a professional criminal who had weaponized trust itself. The legal consequences were about to reshape our entire neighborhood. But first, I had a phone call to make. The police arrested Sarah within 2 hours of my call, charging her with multiple counts of mail theft and organized retail crime. Our neighborhood group chat exploded with messages from residents who'd lost packages over the past year, creating a community-wide inventory of Sarah's crimes that totaled over $15,000 in stolen goods. She pleaded guilty 6 months later, receiving 18 months in prison and restitution orders that she'll probably never fully pay. The betrayal changed how I see trust itself, making me realize that the people closest to us have the best opportunities to hurt us. Now I check my front door each morning with a wariness that never existed before, though I've learned to move forward without letting Sarah's crimes poison every new relationship. Trust your instincts when someone shows excessive interest in your personal business. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, share your story below to remind everyone to stay vigilant.